Okay, I am calling to order the meeting of a special meeting, of the Economic Development Commission, January 14th, 2025. And actually, I'm going to start the AI companion. Does someone know, does that will possibly take notes, right?
That thing takes amazing notes.
Okay, so I'm going to start it, and it will not have heard us compliment it. So will it see, do I have to push anything? Um,
It just said across the top that it was being transcribed for AI comparison. So I think you
okay,
did.
okay, good.
And then it
All right.
sends you after. Yeah.
It's
So
also pulsing on my screen, which is interesting.
All right, so I am going to again call to order the special meeting of the Economic Development Commission, January 14th, 2025. And I will put up the agenda. Let me know if you can see that. Should be able to. Are there any additions or, well, sorry, we have additions or deletions, citizen comments. We have one topic tonight, which is to talk about the ways in which the um, Economic Development Reserve Fund and possibly the EDC, but the funds should be used to support Woodstock's four priorities, which have been set by the select board, the two boards actually, as housing and development, affordability, efficient and effective government, and climate resiliency. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none. Are there any citizen comments that don't relate to our item of new business? Hearing none. We'll go into our first item. And what I'd like to, or only item, what I'd like to do here is to take the chair's prerogative to just share my thoughts on where we are and where we're not, what has happened and what hasn't yet happened, as a way to frame this discussion. Because in the last 48 hours, I've had email exchanges and conversations with three members of the combined boards. And I think including with Ray as the chair of the select board. And so I think I have a sense of what would be most helpful for us to talk about. It's the agenda item, but how to position it and frame it and make it helpful to the select board and trustees. And to do that, I'm going to show you this. So first of all, what's the situation? The boards, select board and trustees, basically want to achieve two things. They want to set clear priorities, and they want to ensure that all the parts of municipal government are generally working with those same priorities. It's hard to disagree with that. And it's understandable to me why they would feel that it isn't perfectly being accomplished in the past. Anyone who's been to any of our meetings or any of the other boards' meetings, I think, can attest to the fact that each of the boards has its own, you know, quirks and priorities, and those priorities are not completely contradictory, but they're also not completely aligned. And they've begun, as we all know, I think they've begun a process to achieve their two objectives of ensuring that we're all basically rowing in the same direction, and they've made some progress. They've articulated four objectives, and I've talked about those four objectives: housing slash development, efficient and effective government, affordability, and climate resiliency. They've also identified 13 short-term, what they're calling goals, but what I call initiatives that they want to achieve. And if you haven't seen the list of those 13, you should ask a select board or a member or trustee to share it with you. I hope they will communicate that to the community soon beyond the public meeting in which it was discussed and shared, but it hasn't been widely shared. So I encourage everyone who's on this to get a copy of that. And I apologize. I'll post a copy into the EDC folder for this meeting after this meeting. Let me just make a note.
John, I have a question about that.
Yeah. Sure.
Exactly who identified the 13 short-term initiatives? Was it a combination of both select board and trustees, or one board, or not? What?
My understanding is that it was through, I don't physically know what it was. It reflects both boards' discussions. I don't know how they.
Did they have a meeting and said, okay, let's identify short-term initiatives?
I believe that, I don't know if they had one meeting or two and combined the list, or both processes, but the lists reflect the input from the two boards.
Okay.
And they were all, I believe, they were public meetings.
Okay.
The next point is that they have not gone far enough in their work. If you look at the 4 objectives, let's just work with the 4 objectives tonight, because we've been talking about those. And I don't think this changes if you look at the 13 initiatives. That doesn't go far enough to provide a commission like the EDC, maybe other commissions as well, usable guidance. It points in a direction, but it's not enough to let us do what they want us to do, which is to make sure that our priorities are the same as theirs and that we're working to support their priorities. For example, should the 4 objectives be interpreted narrowly or broadly? The 4 objectives are silent on that question. Affordability. Should affordability be interpreted by a commission like the EDC narrowly, meaning affordability is what it costs you to pay your electric bill or your water bill, or the taxes you pay? That's what it costs you, or that's what it costs you. Or is affordability a much broader, at the other end of the spectrum, a much broader objective that could say, for example, we want to support marketing Woodstock because marketing Woodstock brings more tourists to Woodstock, and more tourists to Woodstock brings more people interested in moving here, and more people interested in moving here leads to more people moving here, and more people moving here shares a tax burden among a larger group of people, and when the tax burden is more broadly shared, it's more affordable for everybody. And every position in between those two extremes. The word marketing, for example, right? So the word marketing, for example, does not appear anywhere in the list of objectives or initiatives. But select board and trustees, specific members, have spoken about their belief that the objectives do support a continuation of the kind of marketing programs that we have now. One person referred to that as an implicit objective, but it's not stated. And so what are the other implicit objectives? The point is that the work that the boards have done, they've started the process, they haven't finished the process, and so it's not yet far enough along to provide usable guidance to us. If we were to continue as a commission and we were to be asked to support those objectives, we don't have enough guidance yet to be able to do a decent job of that. And here's an important point that I learned today. I didn't learn that more work was needed. That's obvious. And it will take some time. But I also learned that the boards know that more work is needed and that it will take some time. So we're in the middle of a process. And so I asked Ray specifically what would be helpful for us to do. It's going to take some time to finish this. What should we do in the meantime? What would be helpful to you? They didn't ask for us to hold this meeting. They didn't ask. I said to Ray, you didn't ask us to provide you input. He goes, I know. But at the end of the conversation, we agreed that it would be useful for us to have this meeting and for us to provide the following input. So what should we do in the meantime while we're waiting for the board to figure things out and while the board is taking the time that they need to figure it out? First of all, is we need to tell the boards, and it's really the select board in this case, when certain deadlines are getting close, and lay out the options. And there are at least two deadlines, I think only two deadlines that are getting close. And we need to be the ones to say to them, hey, guys, if we continue to be in abeyance, if we continue not to grant more funds and so forth, which you've asked us to do, and we're doing, meaning we're not granting, here's what's going to go by the wayside. And we need to call that to their attention. So that's one of the things we need to do tonight, is to tell them what happens if we stay in abeyance in the next 60 days. Are there things that you need to consider? And what are your options for considering them? And in particular, tonight, we'll talk about the two that I think are on the agenda. If anyone else thinks there are others, one of them is the marketing program, basically, the marketing coordinator, and the funding, the associated funding to run the website and so forth. And then once the RFP for website redesign, once we get through that process, that will come up, I suppose, at the next meeting. And the housing coordinator position. Both of those run out in the near future. Marketing runs out when, Greta?
In March.
And Jill, the housing coordinator position is the end of February?
Yes.
Right. The second thing we might do in the meantime is to think about the longer term decisions that the select board is considering and that a commission like the EDC might consider, which is to offer our perspectives on how the funds in the Economic Development Reserve Fund should be used to achieve the stated priorities. And I'm going to just suggest that we broadly define them. We define affordability to include, all of the things that could lead to greater affordability in the long term, because we have to assume something. And so I'm going to propose that we assume it broadly defined. And then we wait. So that's where I think we are. And that's what I think, and I think, and I know actually, that if we do this tonight, that the select board, we're on the select board's agenda for the 21st. They will hear both of these points. They'll hear what specific decisions we think need to be made, and what the options are in the short term, in the next month or 6 weeks. And here's our perspectives longer term on how we think the Economic Development Reserve Fund should be spent. We could debate at another time whether it should be the EDC that decides that. If there's been a suggestion that the town hire an economic development expert, economic development, that be a position in government the way all the other commissions and boards are supported by, like the Planning and Zoning Department supports the various commissions and so forth. The Finance Committee gets supported by the Finance Department and so forth. But I think if we do these two things tonight, which is what the agenda is, then we will have a receptive audience from the select board, and we'll give them our point of view on the 21st, and then we'll wait. So that's where I think we are. Any comments or questions? Okay. Really? All right, good. Does anyone have any concerns? Any concerns about this? I mean, to me, it reflects a greater degree of clarity than I've had it in a little while. Okay. So let's just start. I'd like to start with the marketing coordinator only because we don't have a presentation. It's really, I think, a very short, relatively simple discussion to talk about when it expires and what would the cost be to continue the program. I think we should talk a little bit about whether or not we need to commit, what's the shortest period of time practically that the select board could commit to, or that we could commit to. What's the longest? I think the longest is a year. What would we recommend? So Greta, do you want to just start that off briefly? We'll take a few minutes on this, and then we'll turn to housing.
Yeah. So to continue our marketing coordinator position in the program as it currently stands, which covers Woodstock VT, social media, our newsletters, the website, and everything. The budget we've used for the last year was $55,000, right around there. With our current coordinator, Jess Kirby, we've received nothing but great feedback so far on Jess, and she has expressed interest in continuing the role. And so once the marketing committee has discussed and decided to push that forward. It'll be up to the EDC to approve it and get final approval from the select board. So to continue going as we have been, which has been really successful over the last year, after a significant cut to the budget, we can continue doing the same at $55,000. And then the website proposal, we've received 6, separately. Like John said, we're still looking to accomplish a website redesign and rebuild, and that is something that will be a different task. But we have received 6 solid proposals for that, and we'll be reviewing that in the marketing committee over the next few weeks.
So let's just say that we would keep the board apprised of that short-term need, but not at this meeting. So that might be a month from now or X weeks from now or something. We'll give the select board a heads up that is coming.
Yeah, what I can say is that those proposals have quoted anything between $20,000 and $40,000.
Okay. And because I think I promised Ray that we would give them options. Is there an option to, what's the shortest period of time? Like, could we extend the current arrangement with Jess for 3 months or 6 months? Or is that something that's not?
I would assume that would be no problem, but I would have to confirm that.
Okay. Could you do that just before the 21st so we can? All right. Any comments or questions about this, Todd, and then Roger?
Yeah, I think that we spent a lot of time on the marketing with Class 4 and going through that and hearing Patrick and then Greta explain the complexities, and some things that were made clear later that were sort of a bummer to me in terms of the ongoing cost. But I think that this number, while not insignificant of $55,000, it's not that I didn't believe in Jess or the work. I just thought that Class 4 did such a solid product that to go backwards, it seemed, would be really a bad idea. But I don't think, from what I've seen, I don't know the data in the way that Greta does in her team, but I think that from what I've seen in terms of being on social, talking to people about whether or not they are aware of Woodstock and feeling of Woodstock, and it doesn't seem to have been negatively impacted at all. So I'm 100% in favor of continuing to not want to go backwards. And now that we're at this price point, it's even better. So, I just really hope that everyone thinks about, the infrastructure we did put in place to get to this place, the amount of awareness that Woodstock has, and, good times and bad come, and you're going to want people to think of our town and when they want a place to go and place to visit and spend their money. So I'm fully in support of continuing the great work that Jess and Greta and their team are all doing.
Thanks. Roger?
Yeah, I definitely am somebody who will stand up and support spending money on upgrading the website. I think it's got potential value well beyond the tourism sector of economic development. I do think you would be well advised, and this is a political question as much as anything else, to address the question of getting some freedom to operate the site in a way that is not encumbered by the chamber's interests. I just think that's something that, from my conversations with members of the select board, that they would be interested in whatever kind of plans that there would be to give a website that's paid for by the town the flexibility it needs to market and communicate for the town. Thanks.
Okay, and I just want to comment that I agree that that's an important issue, whichever way we resolve it. But I view that as, at least the way I'd like to present this to the select board, is that's a website design question and point, which we'll promise that we will come back to the select board in a month. The select board wants us to regularly monitor anything that is coming to a boil. And so the website redesign will come to a boil, meaning a decision will need to be made in about a month. And Roger, that's when I don't want to, not dismissing your comment, I'm just saying we'll have that discussion around website redesign. I don't think it yet hits the urgency. In other words, if we were to approve the $55,000 or recommend it and they were to approve it, it would be operating on day one with the current website and the current policy. So do you agree that that's a next step?
Yes, that's understood. Yes, I'm speaking more of the redevelopment effort.
Okay.
You've got what you've got in place,
right,
and there it is.
Okay. All right. Other comments about the marketing coordinator, or I'm not sure if I'm getting Jess's title right. I apologize. What about the maintenance expenses, Greta? Those don't run out. Those don't run out in March, right? Or do they? Or we do? Or it depends.
No, so what we have is the $2,500 grant that's been set aside to cover costs at an hourly rate from Origin, who currently manages our website. And so that should last us a while, depending on how things go. The chamber covers some of the other costs that are associated with keeping the website up and running, like the hosting. And so really at this point, we've been able to simplify it. So it's the amount that we pay to Jess and her team, and the grant that's been set aside, already approved for, as needed kind of maintenance and whatnot.
Okay.
And I will say, as far as to speak to some of the things Todd said, we are consistently seeing growth month over month as far as engagement on social media and growth of our email list. I think that if anyone wants to check out the website and take a look at the recent blogs and content, it's of the same quality, at least as we've had in the past from other firms. So I would just I would say that I think we've taken into account a lot of the feedback that has come from locals about, why are we marketing so much? Why are we spending money on this? While also taking into account our merchants and small business owners' needs. And we've done a lot to use those efforts to promote the off season and also really just engage with the local community about events that are happening here and how people can engage. And I think there are some really great relationships being made within woodstockvt.com right now. So I'll just say that.
Okay. Any other comments about the marketing coordinator, the short-term decision? Would it be okay if I were to, because we said we would give them options, and I'm imagining how they might feel, and I'm truly just making this up. I don't have any information, but if I were in their shoes, would it be all right if I conveyed the EDC's position on this is, we strongly support continuing this program. This is what it would cost annually. We believe it is feasible. It's logistically possible to continue it for a shorter period of time, for 3 months, if you are planning on re-examining your priorities and think you'll be done in the next 3 months. We would not, as short as 3 months. We would not recommend that this be the regular way we fund any program. But if you need to do it this time because you're doing an episode, a once in a long time review of your priorities, that would be possible, and we could reconsider it again in 3 months. But we'd really like to not run things that way in general, and we recommend continuing it for a year. Todd?
Why offer that? I mean, you're supposing what they're going to say because you have great interaction with them and a fantastic relationship, but why put that out there to give them the option? Like, let's just do it 3 months. Let Ray go and shake his head and look down the table and say, well, we would about something shorter, and acquiesce at 3 months if you have to. But setting up Pandora's box and coming out of you as a sort of leading the witness, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, I would support what Todd. I was thinking the exact same thing when you were mentioning it. Why give them the right now? Just wait, and if you need to do that, fine. But
I think
why do it?
I'm comfortable following the consensus of the group. The reason I proposed it is because I'm not viewing it as a negotiation, but rather that we're all on one team and trying to achieve the same objectives. But I don't feel strongly. I'm just giving you the reason why I suggested it. If I were on that side, I would like.
I mean, John, if you had then why not? I would say, great. If you have to go that way, then go for a 6 month thing to be more respectful of Jess and her efforts, and knowing if she's going to have a check in X amount of months. I mean, I don't know their position, but any of my employees, you know what I mean? 3 months is a pretty shy thing. So
Okay.
maybe a 6 month thing could feel like a little bit of a, you know what I mean?
How are people comfortable with Todd's suggestion?
I'm in support of that.
Anyone opposed? Good. Okay, I will convey it that way. That's a good suggestion. Okay. Now the housing coordinator, there is a short term that housing group has combined these two topics. I think I even have a page that shows that. Oh no. Sorry, I meant to make all of this bottom thing red also, because basically the housing group has put together something that I think, Jill, covers both what we need to do immediately, but also how we would think about the long term. So let's jump to that proposal. I'll put it on the screen, but you all have it in email, and it was posted on the website. And so just realize now that we're talking both about a short-term decision that we need to make them aware of, as well as beginning the brainstorming about how should the Economic Development Reserve Fund be used. We know that housing is the one EDC priority that is explicitly using the same words mentioned as one of the 4 priorities of the select board. So it's the easiest one. We don't need to interpret it. We're all saying the same thing. So Jill, I will pull it up and you or Trina can take it from here.
So both Trina and I are going to present to you tonight. So Trina is the housing advisor. That's the word we use, John.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, and if you could go to the next page. We're speaking to you as the work of the housing group. So what we're going to speak to you about tonight is to recap the achievements that the housing initiatives have achieved, and then present options for the future, just as you spoke about. So just a brief summary. Since June 2022, when we started, we've created 14 new housing units with 3 units in process. That's 14 new local housing units for 17,500 each. However, the rate of success this year has slowed. So we've been looking at how we as a town could all work together. And we've been working with planning and zoning, who are also involved in housing, and talking together. We have a regular monthly meeting now, and we've mapped out a more holistic approach to increasing housing. So we'll talk to you about that. And that we think we can expedite this need to create housing units with 2 efforts, but they're going to need select board leadership. And then we're going to go through several options that we want the select board to decide on now regarding the current programs and the housing advisor role. And it may be that we have a stopgap, like John was talking about, for marketing. Okay, so over to Trina.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone.
Find exactly. There we go.
So the screen we're looking at now shows that we've created 14 housing units since we began the programs in 2022. And we also have 3 units that are in process with the Lease to Locals program with PlaceMate. Of the 14 units that have been completed or are being counted here, 2 of those are still in the reno stage and being built. And those are expected to be online and rented this year. The third one, Garsh, is a new one that we just approved, and he's wrapping up fire safety, but it is currently being rented. So 14 total. The 3 that are with Lease to Locals are all brand new folks that we're working with. We actually might even have a 4th that are in process. So one of the things we'll need to consider, if these don't get pushed through by the end of February, actions where we might want to move these over to the rental incentive program that we were running before, or how we would want to handle those. We can go on to the next slide.
Sorry, but I just want to clarify, because it seems it's really 7, isn't it? I mean, the 3 units, the people have agreed to do them, right? In the same way that the ADU has agreed to build it. It isn't built yet, but they've agreed to build it. These are, it's really 17 units that have been created. They're not all in service.
Potato. They're in process. They don't have a legal agreement signed yet. So that's the differentiating factor. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. They don't have a legal agreement. Got it. So they haven't signed on the dotted line.
And we're working with them, and we hope to have that hopefully by the end of the month. So I didn't I went back and forth, so I'm trying to be as clear and transparent as possible.
No problem. You've done it correctly, I think. Thank you.
One thing that I would note on this chart, if you don't mind, John, if you guys look at that gray line where it has the totals, when we first introduced these programs in 2022, I mean, we had a lot of activity. We had 10 signed up that first year. The second year, you can see it's decreased down to 3 units. But more importantly, this past year, we've only added 1. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. Over 3 years, we've spent $244,500 to create those 14 units. And as I mentioned, a couple of those are still pending, will be completed this year, and 3 are pending a legal agreement with lease to locals. Out of those funds, we were able to build or renovate 2 units that are being rented to local workers. And by units, I mean separate living quarters and accessory dwelling units. 2 are still in development. 4 of the units are being rented. They're the rental program for 2 years, and we had 3 in home share. So what we're seeing in the same period that the rate of housing has decreased, the number of permits in Woodstock has also decreased. If you'll go to the next slide. These are the numbers. Jill had mentioned that we've been working with the planning and zoning and some other folks in housing, trying to take a more strategic view on exactly what we have and what's going on as far as new housing units. So you'll see in this chart, it's very interesting. You'll see from 23 to 25 that the total actually increased in 24, but then it's decreased again. It's become stagnant. It's not growing anymore like it was in 24 or even 23. So 17 of the new housing units are affordable units from the Twin Pines housing. I think some of you are familiar with those. We had 4 units in town with Safford Commons in fiscal year 2025. And in 24, we had 13 units in the village in Mellishwood. 2 of the ADUs are EDC funded. One's in the town and one's in the village. We had some other ADUs as well, but those were in fiscal year 2022. That's why they're not being reported here. So it seems to be a consistent message both within our programs and with permitting that development has slowed significantly this year. You want to go to the next slide? John, I think this was a slide you wanted to talk about. Do you want to take a moment and talk about the cost gap?
Yeah, I think an important factor in what's happening with the EDC and what's happening in the town's development, but more importantly, what we should expect will be needed to support the select board's priority on housing is that workforce housing is uneconomic to create. And I think it's going to be important for whichever group is supporting this, groups, I should say, that are supporting this, to understand and to figure out pretty carefully what that cost is going to be, how much it costs in order to make it economic for private capital to build housing. But we can roughly estimate that it's about $50,000 per unit. And there's multiple ways to look at that, and they all come out to be about the same. There's a couple of folks who are what I would call philanthropic investors who are buying houses on the market and renting them to members of the local workforce. And that doesn't work at the prices at which housing is currently being built, including housing that's on the market right now that would be perfect. Todd, we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you yet. You're not muted, or you're not muted here.
Silenced.
If you want to chat, I think you're probably muted on your machine, but I don't.
His question is, what is a unit?
Oh.
So a unit is a house, basically it's one family dwelling unit. So it could be a single house, could be an apartment within a house, it could be a studio, It has its own front door and it's closed off from everything else.
And the 50,000 that I'm referring to, a couple of the examples are for sort of decent sized 2-bedroom apartments. It's kind of the average, is what I would call it. The experience of these investors is repeated on properties that are on the market right now. There's a property that's perfectly suited for conversion to 4 2-bedroom apartments. It's almost exactly $200,000 over what's needed to make it economic. The local deeds program provides an incentive that is order of magnitude about $50,000 for a house. The state provides about $40,000 or $50,000 for some of the ADU units that were built, and that's, I think, importantly, as Trina, you've explained in the past, the reason why some of those ADUs were built was not solely because of our $10,000, but because of the help that our program was able to provide to get them to receive the full 50 or 60. So I just think it's important that the town, all of us, think about if we want to create 100 units of housing, and I'm picking that number out of thin air. I don't know what the real number is, but I think it has 3 digits. If we wanted to create 100 units, it's going to cost $5 million. That's not going to earn a return. And that number may be 6 million or 4 million, but it isn't 600,000 or 60,000. And so we need to understand that funds are going to need to be allocated. That's the point of this going forward. So, okay, thanks, Trina.
Yeah, thank you, John. So now Jill's going to take it over and talk about some of our improved approach and things that we're working on.
So we were thinking about why has progress slowed this year. So building costs have increased a lot, just as John said. We've increased property taxes, so that decreases the value of the incentives. So you take an incentive, you build an addition to your house or over your garage, and then your taxes go up. And your taxes now go up even more. So we've devalued the value of our incentive every time taxes go up. And then state grants haven't been so easy to obtain. Initially, when we went in 2023, we were the new people and we were some of the first people to access these grants. Now there's a waiting list. So that extra 50,000 isn't readily available. So we want to propose some ways going forwards to use what we've learned here, that taxes dilute the benefits of incentives, that building costs are far more expensive than anyone could have imagined 5 years ago, that red tape makes things really difficult for even the most enthusiastic. So that's red tape but we've experienced some with fire inspections. There's red tape involving permits. There's red tape getting grants. There's just a lot of red tape that you have to keep going through. And every bit of red tape causes you delays and costs. And that changes the economics of your project. And then we don't have any water. So nothing's been happening in the village because nobody can build anything. So we wanted to use all of those different things as we worked with planning and zoning and the planning commission to map out this more holistic approach and really suggest it to the select board that this is an approach to housing that maybe Woodstock should adopt. Okay, next one. So we divided all the different ideas that we had into 2 huge buckets. And we think that if we work on both of these at the same time, then that will expedite creating housing units. So the first bucket is to streamline the development process. So this is what the planning and zoning department and the planning commission are involved in all the time. And there are some more things that the town needs to be doing all in total. So the first one is to create water access in the village and the East End. The second one is to update the zoning bylaws, the town and the village plan. And I'll talk a bit more about both of those. And then to create a state designated neighborhood development area, which will give us access to grants. The second bucket is to make development financially attractive. So we've all talked to you about the things that are making our $10,000 grants a drop in the bucket, really. So we need to look at ways to improve the dollar incentives with federal, state, or local funding. And we need to be seeking taxation changes so that people are not penalized. If it almost feels like you give with the left hand and you take away with the right hand, and we need to protect people, at least for a few years, from increased taxes and a couple of other things. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about those in a bit more detail. So, and one more point. We think a lot more people need to be working on housing, on both initiatives. So we've got the select board, we've got the EDC, we've got the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we've got the people employed by the town. We've got the regional energy coordinator, whose mandate is energy, but is first realizing that you can't actually change energy unless you change the way you develop houses and people driving to work and things. We're working with our state legislator, and they need to be on board with whatever we're doing. We need the listers to be involved, because there are certain things that can be done relating to property taxes that the listers control. So we want everyone to be aligned and supporting worker housing. We need all the town and the village board and commissions. So we don't want a development review board to say no. We need a development review board to be saying, yes, this is worker housing. This is one of our major initiatives. Let's move this through, or let's just do this to move it through. And we need many more volunteers, realtors, developers, and housing enthusiasts. So a much bigger team to crack this enormous nut. Okay, now the next page, and I'll talk more about the development, streamlining the development process. So this one in particular needs lots of actions from lots of people across municipal government. So the first thing, probably the most important thing, is to create water access in the village and the East End. So the town's taken the first step, which is to buy the water company. Now we have to fund the state mandated improvements. And next, we have to make sure that those improvements actually deliver increased water pressure to the East End, because what's there right now, they cannot take a single new house. And that's been the case for some years. So the first round of bond payments that have been approved by the voters are to make the fire hydrants in town work and bring water to the village centre. They may or they may not bring enough water to the East End. And so we have to stay on that, because there may be a second bond needed. The second point here is to update the zoning bylaws and the town and the village plan. So there's a municipal planning grant that we're going to apply for, and we being planning. And we need to be making short and long-term amendments to the village and town bylaws. There are certain things that are not in our town plan that mean we're not eligible for certain grants. And then we need to look at the process for the permitting process and look at it and see if there are any ways to streamline it. Some other towns have been doing this by having pre-agreed designs. There are different ways to tackle this, but basically it takes months to get through it right now. It takes a lot of people looking at your plans, having their personal opinions, and we need to streamline it. The third bullet is to create a state designated neighborhood development area. This one will give us access to more grants, will help us not have to go through so many of the Act 250. Is that right, Trina, saying that? So yes. The Act 250 is a major hurdle for any developer to go through. And a lot of developers won't even enter anything if they have to go through that. So if we can get a neighborhood development area, it will ease that.
Yeah. And then a couple things to add on to that, Jill, if you don't mind. I have some information here. If we develop an NDA, it can save up to 7 months on average in state permitting, and save an average of $50,000 in state permit fees. So things like that. And the appeals process is also less stringent, and the Act 250 rules that Jill mentioned. So there's a lot there. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. And then the last one on this page is just decrease the information barriers. There's very, very little written in simple English about how to get through this whole process. And that's an obvious one that we can do. right now you have to look at multiple pages that are in legalese I can't understand. So there's ways to make it easier and more friendly for people to move through this process. So all of that's in the under that bucket. The second bucket is the one that's going to cost a lot of money. So we want to make development financially attractive. We're talking about closing that $50,000 gap. So what we're asking for is new and enhanced option tax funded EDC grants, whether they're called EDC grants or housing grants, don't care, but we have to do this at a level that we're not, that's way beyond the money we're talking about now. We have to explore TIFs, tax increment financing, and different ways to get state incentives. We have to explore other state and federal programs. We have to do this taxation work. We have to seek short-term property tax exemptions for new projects. Obvious ones are projects that the EDC has funded or VHIP has supported, but longer term, any development projects that are aimed at worker housing, we want to give them property tax relief. And then we want to explore and change negative incentives. So there's a current use withdrawal penalty, there's permit costs, maybe those can be reduced. They're small, but they're all signals. And then we need to look at creating revenue from new taxes to perhaps fund this program. So things like a vacancy tax and non-homestead taxes. So taxes for people who are not homestead in Woodstock. They're currently lower than residents. And there's work afoot in the state that will soon come to the towns to change that so that different rates can be applied. Okay. So those are ways to go forwards. So we're not talking about, well, we might be, you could go the whole extreme and you could build 20 units on a greenfield site. You could convert 3 houses. All of these depend on changing the rules in the beginning, that bylaw stuff. So that might seem very administrative, but it's actually what makes the other things possible. So what we've done now is to try to look at different options of how we can go forwards. We're in a position where the housing advisor's contract ends on February the 28th. So we're looking for a fairly immediate decision because we have somebody who's making the programs work who may not be with us on March the 1st. So we've got 4 options to talk about. So option 1 is our most negative. We could suspend all the programs and just carry on with our current obligations to those who are already in a program. And we reckon that that would cost about 6,300, so 10% of the current costs. And that would be our worst case scenario. But we just want to get across that you can't stop everything. There's still a cost. Option 2 would be to continue the programs as they're currently designed, to bring lease to locals in-house, assuming that we don't increase the incentives, and so we're offering 10,000 or these smaller amounts, and assuming that we don't get huge interest this year versus last year, then we could be talking about keeping the housing advisor going for about 50% and keeping legal and advertising costs, and then allowing program costs of between 28 and 75,000. And those funds are already allocated to housing. So we're not asking for money we're not asking for any more money. We're just saying, let's keep the money allocated to housing. Then option 3 is really to take a look at what enhancements can we make to the programs to make them more attractive. So we're talking about increased incentives, contributing perhaps to a successful local deeds program, funding larger development programs, pursuing those state and regulatory changes. So moving ahead with some of these ideas. And that would mean we need to keep the housing advisor working at her current hours. And then the program costs would be to be determined because that would depend on your incentives. Then we have another option, option 3 plus, which is everything we've talked about in option 3, plus have the housing group or whatever designation it is also project manage the 2 collaboration efforts. And the costs for that are to be totally determined. But what we see as the opportunity, if you could go to the next page, please.
Jill, sorry, can you just, is it appropriate now to explain? I'm a little confused as to what the 2 collaboration efforts are.
If you go back 3 slides to see the 2 blue boxes, the 2 efforts to streamline the development process and make the development. So if you stay here,
okay,
we think that we need to stay together. We need to keep the pressure on. We need to keep working on these things. And we can't have the Planning Commission taking all the time in the world to do one thing that's critical to changing the bylaws. Because without the change in bylaws, we can't become a neighborhood development area. Without the neighborhood development area, we can't get grants. We can't reduce the permitting process. It all works together. And so we think that some people need to actually manage this whole process. It's a major task.
Okay, got it. So option 3, okay.
3 plus. So our preference obviously is option 3 plus. We really want to make a difference, and we think this is the way to make a difference. But these are proposals that we are thinking to propose to the select board next week.
Can I just ask that if there's a little bit of a mix and match? For example, and I'm not in favor of this or opposed to it yet, I'd have to think it through, but would it be possible to pause, to take option 1 for the programs that are in existence and management of the 2 collaboration efforts? In other words, let's pause the programs. I'm not advocating this. I'm just asking. In other words, we have to spend, you're arguing, and I agree, we have to spend $6,300. Otherwise, we have to undo units. And that makes absolutely no sense. So we have to do option 1. But could we do option 1 plus the managing of the collaboration efforts, which would basically put the incentive programs on hold and turn our focus to this? Maintenance plus this is what I'm saying. I mean, that seems like physically, logistically, it's possible. It's just another option.
Yeah, logistically, it's possible. I would, and I wouldn't support it, because why would you stop something that you've already started and stop your momentum and then have to start all over again? But sure, I think it could logistically be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
John, I speaking in terms as housing advisor, I'm flexible. If you decide that you want to proceed with me being the housing advisor, I'm flexible on the options that are chosen. And I think it really just takes a decision on which options or which things we want to focus on, and then come up with a description of the work to be done.
Todd, let's get some reactions to this. Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, Jill and Trina's work in their group is invaluable, right? I don't think, Jill, you talked a long time ago about, basically not your words, but throwing darts and to see what works. I don't think these programs work as well as we intended. So I'm not against, I don't think it's something, there's been a decline, right? So if we went with option 1, stopped all the programs, like I personally wouldn't be offended by that, but I would be offended if we just said, well, we give up, right? So I think like what's intriguing, and I would have to think it through as well. This is just, I hadn't considered a multi-pronged approach like John. I'm not as smart as him, but in terms of like, okay, you've identified the pressure points, right? And you know where you want to go forward. So if it was $100,000 to move forward with the aspects of that previous slide from a few back, your 2 priorities, versus, and no houses were built for, or no new ADUs beyond what we already did, and that was the bang for the buck. I think there's an argument there to think about, where then you can get the next year all your cake and eat it too, because you've now teed up all this regulation. I mean, as someone who went through the village center designation, which had 0 negative impact for my community and took 2 years, you're going to be racing an uphill battle. It just takes one person to think it's a dumb idea or one wrong warning or whatever. So, you know, I I don't know where I go with this, but I think it's something worth considering in terms of we only have so much money. The TBDs are rough for anyone. They'll be rough for the select board. They're rough for us, right? So just curious on, if you had a certain amount of money and you had to put it in one place, where would you put it?
I'd put it on making change happen because the current systems, the current programs are not working.
Me too. Yeah.
Sorry, Joe, and then I'm not sure, Larry, did you raise your hand? No? Okay, Joe.
Well, I think I think I can I probably be elaborating on what Todd just said. I mean, it seems to me that this program, as valuable as it is, and as beneficial as it will be to the community, seems to be pretty complex in itself. I mean, you got to go to the select board with this and, and explain every intricacy of it all. My sense is the select board's attention span isn't as great as we'd like it to be in the first place. I don't mean it as a jab, but they're doing a lot. So, is there a way to streamline this process so that the presentation can be clearer, easier to understand, and more concise? And that's probably it sounds like a pretty naive question, but it just sounds like there's a lot here for anybody you want to talk to get approval from, for them to wade through. It's all good stuff, it's all valuable, but is there a way to to kind of make it more direct and simple? That's what I was wondering.
You mean the presentation itself that we've just done?
Yeah, yes.
I
And
think
I can't imagine anybody working harder on any one thing. I know Todd worked very hard with the childcare program, but I'm sure you guys have been really working hard on this sort of thing, and I commend you. But I'm just trying to think of how can we get this bird to fly? And then you got to get it by the select board, and for them to try to absorb all of this and discuss it between how many are there? 5? I think you're going to be trying to roll a boulder up the hill.
all right. Okay.
That kind of proves
get my
our
point
point
across.
on the whole collaboration aspect of what needs to happen with the town and the village and everybody else involved in housing, because that's the only way you're gonna make this bird fly.
Other comments from other comments and reactions to this? I have one, but I just want to give other people a chance to. Roger?
Hi. This is totally speculative, and like John, I can't I can't say I agree or disagree necessarily, but I do think if we're going to be select board whisperers here, that's something that pauses and starts really planning to deal with the structural problems might be a really good approach for that. I might be a very resonant approach with them from what I can see that they're trying to do, so that putting together teams ad hoc or whatever to start lowering the structural barriers that no matter how much money we throw at it are constraining the ability to do large, meaningful progress on this. I think that's well worth considering, to pull back as much as you can without stopping things that are actually in progress, and then make a commitment that there's going to be an address of the fundamental structural issues that are impeding housing. Thanks.
to me, there are I react to this presentation. I do think Joe, I do think that there are ways, and Jill, I'm sure you'd agree, to kind of, streamline this presentation if we wanted to. There are two new things that I learned in this presentation that kind of struck me that I would take away from it. The first is this page. I mean, it's not new, but you've put, started to put this together. You've started moving towards this. It's not just the EDC working group anymore. And this list is more complete, and you clearly can't eliminate any of the entities. And the need to manage that, in other words, this page, I think, is something, and this is maybe what everyone is saying. This page is something that I think the select board could, A, immediately understand, and B, immediately coalesce around, or quickly coalesce around. And the other thing is, we need to spend $6,000 or $7,000 a year to make sure that the 14 units or the 17 units come online. And so to me, that's why I suggested that. I think if we separate I think pausing the programs is not problematic. We have the programs completely designed. We could choose to do three things at once: maintain whatever we call this, make change happen. I like that, and continue with the incentives. But I think continuing with the incentives takes away from this page. And I think this is a multi-year way of looking at this. It doesn't presuppose any answer. I've always argued we should be building 30 and 50 units. And when I say that to Jill, she rolls her eyes and says, who's going to approve that? This doesn't presuppose one or the other. It doesn't throw out the programs and incentives we have. It doesn't assume them. It basically says, look, if we're going to get serious, let's get serious. And let's invest in that. And I would say that, by the way, I'm okay, Jill, because you guys have put so much work into this. I'm okay in differentiating, in giving, even if the EDC approves what I just said, in giving you and the team a chance to say what you recommended to us and to argue for that too. But I would say that for me as an EDC member, I would vote for this plus the 6,300 and figuring out what this piece of it would cost, so forth.
So the only argument against that is, at last, we have actually seen this in the last 4 weeks, interest in the lease to locals program. So, or what was called our rental incentive program. I would hate to turn that off by stopping something. So I think that maybe a way to present this is to say, we've learned a lot and this is a big issue. Here we go. This is what needs to happen. Now, while this big picture is going on, let's just continue at this base level what we're doing without spending any more money on it beyond what actually creates a unit. So not developing more programs. And then you say, but we're going to put all of our effort behind this, and then this tiny little amount against current programs.
Well, you mean beyond the 6,300?
Yes.
Well, then define if you were to define what that tiny little amount would be, that I think that's a good way to do it. Todd.
Okay.
And Todd.
That's to my point. We have to know a number. So it's sort of like the TBDs are too much. No one's going to want to vote on a TBD in that way. So I think if Jill, I like what you're saying. Like, so if someone showed up in 2 months and was like, oh, well, I would do this right now, we'd be bummed out because the ROI is so huge on what you've already built. So maybe there's a mechanism that we can look and say, okay, if this, then that, a nice Boolean function that we can, a simple, clean one that we can build in but we have to have some sort of, hey, we're going to put 150,000 toward this slide, but we're going to say that up to 50 of it without new voting can go toward 6 new ADUs if they come to fruition in the program that already exists or something like that. So I would say keep it simple, stupid, right? Like try to lay it out in like super clear ways. But if you get us to say, hey, here's the pool we're looking for, and here's what it's capable of. That's in essence what you did the last 2 years of funding, where you're carrying over monies and whatnot, whether they were encumbered or not, and keeping the encumbrance. But I think that I could support that totally. Like I think that you need to fix this slide. This could cost $300,000 in 3 years to fix this slide. Who knows, right? But this is where we need to focus. But at the same time, I'm right. You're right. We don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot if someone comes up because they heard about the program now or they're ready to take the plunge. So I just think we need to bridge that gap and find a mechanism for it.
Trina?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. One of the things I'll let you know, the last couple of weeks, I've put advertisements back into the listserv again for the programs. And I've already got 3 people that are wanting to talk to me on different things. So I'm not entirely sure that the current programs are dead per se. And I still think that there's, some gasoline in the tank for those that keep running, and interest there, because I'm still getting responses. I've got some meetings set up. So anyway, for what it's worth, there's still activity.
Larry? But we can't hear you, Larry. You're muted.
Oh,
You're muted in Zoom. There you go.
That was my whole thought. No, I'm just wondering whether there should be a attempt to find out if the development would be financially attractive, assuming that the streamlining was done. In other words, going to the select board or the planning or whatever, saying, if you could do this, you could make the neighborhood designation or whatever. We have figured out how the EDC could help make the actual development financially attractive. We have, X $300,000 a year that we could use to bring down, let's say, a loan or a bond of X millions of dollars to subsidize a development. And this could work if the planning commission were to work with us, and then if we could do these designations or whatever. So maybe it's inherent in what you're all saying, but feel like there should be an activity to actually see what's out there. You come up with $50,000 per unit, but is that correct? And even if it is correct, is that really a barrier? Maybe it's not a barrier at all.
So, Larry, that's exactly the kind of work that we imagine happening when you get to work on making development financially attractive, working out what this really means. Because right now we can read articles, we can see what other people have done, but nobody's put pen to paper and calculated this.
Yeah, a case study.
Yeah. Larry, I think that this slide that's on the screen, I think is exactly the work that you're talking about. And that's why both financially and streamline are both on the same page. Elisa?
I wanted to say a couple things. So from what Larry said, I think what he's saying is to get everyone on board in this major way, like if there was a way to write out a few different examples, like these are the grants we can get if we do this and this and this, and this is how an investment would be, and someone would do it, because right now no one will do it. But if you do that, because you could do all this work and you could end up with a still uninvestable situation. And this is years of work. Like this is, regardless of how many people you get involved, like this is still going to take a long time because there's a lot of approvals needed and blah, blah, blah. And to change all the bylaws, it sounds like the planning board wants to change everything. Anyways, it's a lot to do. And if you know the goal's going to work, you're going to get people to do it faster, because you could end up doing and it may not even make sense to do it if it won't come out. So I'm curious about that too. And I think a lot of people are like, is there any way to make development affordable? And I just wanted to say about your program that I think that development is totally unaffordable and there's no water anyways. You can't develop anything new. I think that your program only offers so much money, which is peanuts in a big development, but it's amazing for someone to do an ADU or for someone to change something in their home. And so I think that another thing to think about is if there's a way to increase that, if there's a way to increase getting the word out or to increase that part, like that, I think is going to be way more successful and much faster than this, although you might do both. And also that would keep your program from being shut down. You should keep it going and increase the benefit of what you can do, because this is a long ways away.
So that's basically what we're proposing in option 3, is to take a look at the programs we have and enhance them and make them more attractive, put more marketing behind them. And so option 3 plus is do it all. Like make your current programs more attractive, advertise them more, and start working out what these things are worth.
Yeah, so I think you could do that. You could do the first part if you're focusing on, you know, the smaller things inside people's houses, the realistic stuff. I think you could find a way to get more people. And the other one could be in steps, like maybe the way to get everyone on board for that. Everyone wants to do that. The select board, I mean, I personally don't. I'm not sold on this massive development. I'm not sold that we need all this housing, but many do. Everyone on the boards wants it, so they're going to want to do it. And I think that maybe there's a way to put it in. I agree that you can't have a to be determined, but maybe there's a way to put it in steps. Like step 1 would be an exercise like Larry recommended. And then you could figure out, okay, this is what makes sense to change. And this is what we don't need to work on, but this is what's going to be effective in helping us. And then you'll know what you actually need to do and how long that will take. And maybe if you present it that way, it will be a way to make it happen.
Thank you.
Todd,
Thank you.
and then thanks, Lisa. Todd, and then I have a quick comment.
Yeah, just quickly, those are good points. I think that again, as someone who's gone through a lot of planning and zoning in this town for private citizen with one commercial building, I personally, and again, this is just my opinion, I feel like what Jill's group has presented are actually the baby steps. There are going to be so many other steps in there. So really, you know, to someone who hasn't gone through that, it seems like a long list. It could be years of work, it could not. But I think that with Jill's gas in her tank, right? And like the push now, I think that, and I'm not saying I think this is the best course of action, you know, to pull John's political thing all the time. I'm not sure, but Jill's looking for a blitzkrieg. She's looking for, look, let's put this in, get this done. It has to happen. We need all this, 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 this. We're in the red zone. Let's get a touchdown, because one little thing can't hold it up for so long. So it is a complex situation, but I personally am not overwhelmed by Jill's list that she's presented in that way, just because of the experiences I've had in town. I think that no matter where you go, there is a value to getting any of these changes in any of these departments. And again, just modifying the town plan could take a long time for a couple words, but these things need to happen. So even if we vested a 6-figure sum, $100,000 or $200,000, and half of these items got done, it would be what our charge is: economic development, the future development of Woodstock. Because we're not talking about today, we are unfortunately talking about tomorrow. So, you know, I do support. I'm not sure about 3 plus personally, because there's no number attached to it, right? But I do support putting a lot behind this.
Okay, I'm going to make a process decision. We've got about 15 minutes left. We need to go back. We need to give them we must give them the short term. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong document. We must give them you know, a heads up on what short-term decisions they need to make. And this is a short-term decision because the current contract expires, as the marketing one does, in about a month and a half. So I'd like to spend the rest of the next 15 minutes just to finish out and see if we can make a clear EDC recommendation on, we've already done that for marketing, if we can do that for the housing advisor, which is the housing advisor is the piece of the housing effort that is short term. We have to decide that, because otherwise it stops in 6 weeks. I think, and I want to bring up a kind of an elephant in the room, at least in my mind, question or issue that I think eventually needs to happen, and maybe it should happen now, meaning, in the next couple of months, which is that the place for an effort like this in municipal government is not as a working group of the Economic Development Commission. It's as part of the Planning and Zoning Department. And I think, by the way, that's not to say that there wouldn't be an advisory. I mean, the only part of the Planning and Zoning Department on this long list is here. That doesn't mean that everyone else can't be involved. We couldn't have people from an economic development perspective from the EDC part of this effort, and the representative from the listers and more volunteers and so forth. But really, to me, what we're sort of talking about here are three things, and all of them the three things we're talking about are: we don't want to lose the units we've created, so we need to do option one. We need to have a person looking at that, doing that work, and that's about 10% of a person or something like that, whatever. We should continue at a lower level than in the past of focus and activity, but we shouldn't just kill at least the Lease to Locals rental incentive program, because it looks like that might be coming to life. And we need to put significant staffing against this. What if we were to say that our recommendation is to take the entirety of the role of housing advisor, to make that a position within the Planning and Zoning Department, paid for by it's about $50,000 a year of funding from the Economic Development Reserve Fund, and to place that into the Planning and Zoning Department, and to have that person not do planning and zoning, to do housing, which is a subset of planning and zoning, and have that person be managed by the Planning and Zoning Department, and have them spend their time on the three things that we just talked about. So let me just, it's a little bit like, anyway, that should be pretty clear. Greta and then Todd.
I think that is a great idea. I think that, like Trina and Jill have been saying, we need more hands on deck and more, different parts of this list of individuals and boards and everything kind of working in tandem. And so I'm in full support of that suggestion you just made, if it's at all possible. I also just think that, kind of zooming out a little bit, with the new objectives from the select board or the joint boards, clearly housing is really important to them, and that's kind of a no-brainer for what we've been working on. And so I'm in favor of really standing behind this, as far as our recommendation to the select board is just, hey, you guys want housing. We have been working on housing. We've got these two, Trina and Jill, that are clearly very versed in the complexities of it all. And I feel that, especially given these times that we're not quite sure how we could be most useful, it could be a great time for us to all be involved in a working group or a couple working groups, being advised by Jill and Trina, and kind of doing a lot of this work while we're not necessarily awarding other grants and all the other categories. I think that this is a good opportunity for us to kind of really put a lot of effort toward this and make some of these things that are our current barriers happen. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Was it Todd? Okay, go ahead, Todd.
I don't think bringing a town employee with, I don't know their fringe benefit structure or what the fringe is in that employee, but 50,000 could be 80,000 for all we know, pension, health, welfare. The idea of adding someone in the structure, all those things, I think it's a bad idea. I think it complicates it. Although I like the idea behind the idea. I have a simpler idea. I think we should propose $250,000, do exactly what the select board said not to do, and bring a real proposal. Because the way we can do it is, you're dragging your feet, select board. You've given us 4 areas. The only one we actually have a pure data point on is housing. Well, funny enough, we've been working really hard on it for 3 years, and we have this program that's been successful. This program's been successful. It's done this and that. It's brought in this many students, this many families. What we're going to do is we're going to do $6,300 to the 200,000, let's say, and we're going to go continue our current obligations. We're going to have 50,000 for the housing advisor, who not only goes and works on this stuff, but also helps folks that continue to do ADUs and whatnot navigate through the state and other government agencies at an ad hoc thing to go and make these things realities. And then on top of that, because remember, Select Board, it's encumbered funds. You're not allowing us to spend otherwise anyway, and we're only going to spend it with success. So we're going to go to 3A in that way, and it won't be TBD. It'll be capped at this $200 with the delta coming from whatever successful ADUs can come through it. And we say, look, if this money gets spent, you're not going to be pissed off because everything has a huge ROI. If it doesn't get spent, it was just encumbered and we have a date, we can can it. That's what I would do. Give them, it's not asking for something new. It's an extension with a carrot, right? The carrot is, this is the only thing you've come up with. You're really busy. This is a direct point on your data of what you want this town to go and work on. These people are working hard. How long can we get Jill and her people to work for free? How long can we get Trina at the discounted rate she's at? We don't know these things. We need to take the momentum. So I propose a $200,000 or $250,000 position with the caveats in there to the select board.
I would support the concept totally. Maybe not the money, maybe not the numbers, but the concept. Bring it right to them. Listen, let's do something if we're going to do something, and bring it right to them.
Todd, is that 3+? Is that what you're saying, or it's like option
No,
4? Is
it's
what
option. It's option 4. It's
Yeah.
3+ with a cap, right? It's
Right.
3+ saying like, hey, we're going to encumber funds because remember, if they don't spend it, it's a carryover, and we have to decide whether
Right.
that carryover means anything or not. So you're really just banking on success, right? You're banking on if it works, we're spending it, great ROI. If it doesn't, it's our money still anyway. So I think that the idea of the hesitancy to go and do new grants, that's a good thing. Fine, if that's what they want to do, great. But this is a continuation of a program. All the success of this program, interestingly enough, unlike the childcare where it's not as easily quantifiable in a certain way, there are serious data points of exactly what it costs to go and bring housing online, and it doesn't cost more money except the delta of Trina's daily salary to bring anything additionally online. So it's a great hedge.
I really love that idea because it's like we've been just talking and talking and talking, and this actually still allows us, yes, we're waiting and seeing, but we're also actually potentially doing something banking on success, and it doesn't cost unless we have success. It feels really positive. That's my
Oh,
point.
and one other thing to put in, we should put the savings of bringing lease to locals in house. It's not in, it's got to be something, some amount of
Amen. That's like
$1,000.
30,000, right? Yeah.
No, but it's not savings. It's money. That money is, there's no money encumbered beyond February or March.
Right.
And so
A reduced cost.
And the
Yeah.
costs that I mean, they've earned the money that we've paid them. They're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs, but the big money hasn't been spent. But given that the other programs with the small incentives are not creating volume for Trina, we do think we have the capacity to bring it back.
Yeah, a couple of points. I think, given the scale of what, Todd, you're talking about, and given the kind of change in direction or change in organization that what I was talking about, I think there's a way to quite simply lay out all of these options for the select board to understand. I don't think they are, in my opinion, remotely ready to accept any of them other than the 6,300. And I think, however, I don't want to constrain the ideas because I think each of these ideas has a different point that it's making, and it's the points that we're making that are important for the select board to understand. One is that there's significant enthusiasm for a very significant allocation of our funds towards housing. One is that we want to save the existing programs. They're not that expensive to run. And we think that staffing needs to be put against. We strongly support. What I'm hearing. We strongly support this approach. and people and staffing is going to be needed to make this approach work. I mean, those are all kind of themes, and then there are some different ways that you could proceed. So
Why give them the worst option though? Let them, if they're elected officials, they're smart people, they can come up with their own option. Well, we don't want to do anything. Well, then fine, do $6,300. Why even present it to them?
no, I'm suggesting that we basically say that, no. Why suggest what to them?
I wouldn't present to them just option one. I
No,
wouldn't even
I
consider
wouldn't
that,
either. I
right?
wouldn't either.
Okay, I thought you were going to give them the plate,
No.
right?
What I'm saying is let me say that the thing that I proposed, what I consider that I proposed, 60. I propose.
Mine's simpler, 200,000, and we only spend it when it means something, except for Trina's delta of salary. I can say it in like 6 words. Yours sounds
That pretty
complicated.
much
Yeah, if they
streamlines
want
it
to
right
approve it.
down and hits it right on the points.
Yeah.
You can explain it, John, in a way that
I
you can
agree.
do
I
it.
absolutely can explain it, and we can
Then
just.
let's vote on it.
Yes.
Okay. That's fine. I'm happy to vote on it. In my opinion, we will be erasing any advice, in my opinion. And I don't want to impose this opinion on it. I'm just telling you why I will vote against if we are only allowed, if not allowed, if we only present one option, why I will vote against this is because we will have used up our chance when we have their attention to focus on what we think about housing.
You
Because in
also
my
have
view,
their ear anyway. So, and I'm not saying we shouldn't give multiple choices. I'm saying this is the choice I prefer, but yours sounds complicated because even someone as articulate as you has a hard time saying it. So in terms of getting the select board to get it, it's again, I would talk about, look, this
my,
isn't Vegas gambling. This isn't, it's really about a dollar spent is actually a dollar we've earned times this, and that.
why, why would why would they encumber funds now for a program that we can't define
Okay.
when they have the ability at any moment in the future to encumber those funds because they are the deciders of the funds?
They absolutely are. We can put a deadline on it. We can put a deadline on it that the funds are reverted at a certain point, or we can put a deadline for reference. And of course, anything they've done, they can undo or redo. They've already said that when they took money for the water. So I think that we have to go with the history of what we've done as this place and brought what we think is the best option for them. You haven't particularly in the past brought them multiple choice, right? But now we're sitting here in a world of fear. We're afraid we're going to lose opportunity. And I'm not saying, look, you're probably right. You're almost always right. Okay. And I'm always the one that sits here, bitches and argues and makes bad jokes. So I'm just telling you that I think that if you get them the thing to turn their wheels and try to explain to them how it's a no-lose situation. Look, you're slow, select board, because you're so busy, not because you're stupid, because you're busy. So if we go and put this time, let's look at 7, 8 months from now. Okay. Just like we're going to do for 6 months for marketing. And then you can decide if you want to re-encumber some of it that we haven't spent, something like that.
Todd, let me interrupt for 1 second. Let me just let Jill make a comment, and then Todd, just get ready. I'd like to ask you to explain precisely as you can what you mean, because I agree that your explanation was very short, but I have no idea actually what it means. So, Jill, do you want to make a comment, and then Todd will explain what his proposal is.
I think that we don't need to worry about encumbering. I think we should suggest encumbering money, because what we are saying is that anything we do on housing, even if we don't know the shape of what we're going to do, is going to need money. So let's put $200,000 away every year for housing, even if we don't spend it till year 4. I don't think we shouldn't worry about saying that. We should just go for it.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Todd,
we're going to have grand plans in year 4 and no money.
no. Right now, just remember that no money is being encumbered. No, sorry, let me put it differently. All of the money is being set aside. Every penny that that comes into the Economic Development Reserve Fund is not being spent. That's my point. They don't need to encumber it. It's encumbered.
Oh, I see. Okay.
100% of the money. Why 200,000? Why not 400,000 or 300 or 60?
So what happens if somebody comes up with a suggestion to pay a big chunk toward the bond for the sewer rebuild?
They take it.
That then unencumbered money could be free for anybody.
The select board can encumber and unencumber. We don't.
All right,
So,
John, can I
Todd,
explain?
go ahead.
Let me go through it. I'm going to try to be as a college dropout. I'm going to try to be as clear and concise as possible. I just got a haircut. I feel smart. Okay. We're going to give the housing besides Trina, who is a cost, right? We're going to bring back in the lease to locals. Trina's going to do the work. Jill's going to continue volunteering. All the team's going to work. We're going to go and spend this $6,300 no matter what to go and fill the obligations of this year of the program that we've already done. Any future success of the program, the delta between 6,300 and 200,000, okay? We're going to put that in there and say, hey, this is reserved for housing. So that's what I mean. We're going to reserve it for housing, okay? And we're going to say, hey, we're going to reserve housing. John, you tell me, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. We're going to reserve it for housing so you can't steal it for the sewer no matter how pissed people get. But there'll be a reckoning. And we're going to go Jill and look her in the eye and be, Jill, it doesn't work. Or Jill, you're a hero and we're putting your name on this building. Or whoever it is that's running the thing that's putting all our time and energy in it for free. We're going to be grateful. So the only thing that they'll be paying is at this point that I can see here is Trina's work, right? Which I think is valuable anyway, because the reason we could talk about that is the help she does with the state and aid programs and all these things with all these folks getting it. So anytime they take money out of that 200 that we set a cap on through our grant process where we would have a review anyway, right? And can claw it back if we want and put it in the fund for whatever they want to steal it from, is only based on success. That's it. It won't be sent on any waste. That's what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Did that work?
It does make sense. Let me just ask you to clarify so that we can understand I'd like to vote on. Is fine. You're recommending that we maintain. And by the way, that we maintain the housing advisor's role fully and fully fund it. And right, so fully fund the housing advisor. Have the housing advisor spend their time on the current portfolio of programs and encumber an additional 150,000. Let's just say that and encumber another 150,000 for housing, which can only be put towards success-based programs. Okay. And that I think is the entire
and there's a deadline where they can decide, like, you know what, we want to be able to say we want to use that money for the sewer.
Okay.
Isn't that simpler than, I mean, everything else we've been talking about.
Let Joe, before we advocate for it, I just want to clarify what the it is. So the proposal is retain not full-time, but retain the housing advisor at 50-ish thousand, whatever, 48 or 53, whatever the number is, 50,000. Have them maintain the current incentive programs.
Absorb the lease to locals work.
Bring the lease to locals in-house. And encumber an additional $150,000 beyond what's encumbered now. To success-based programs, either the existing programs or new success-based programs.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
And that's the proposal, and have that encumbrance, the remaining unspent funds revert back to unencumbered status after what period of time?
Let's say we re-examine it in 9 months at their discretion.
Yeah, I would say a year, Todd.
I was just trying to be politically savvy there.
I say 2 years.
Yeah. I know, Jill. We know where you'll go. We know.
Yeah.
Okay, so Todd, you're proposing, so re-examine it in 1 year.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes. I think because you've proposed something that is specific and clear, let's call that a motion. And is there a second, Joe?
I want to add one thing. Well, or we can make this a different motion.
Why don't you say what you wanted to add?
Okay. So I think that if we really want to make this work and we want to work on these 2 streams of activities, I think there is a job that needs to be done, which is outside of managing current programs and lease to locals and all of that, which is to do what Elisa was talking about, which is work out what we have to do for a neighborhood development area and not leave it all to the one zoning administrator that we have and the planning commission.
In other words,
So we need
do
to
what's on this page.
fund what's on this page.
I would think about coming back later after they say yes and talking about taking it out of that nut and hey, here's what we want to do with this piece, because I feel like, you know what I mean, Joe?
Yeah. Get the basics done first, and then you can kind of branch it out afterwards. But I would agree with Tom. Just keep it simple right now. And this sounds like this fills the bill right here, in my opinion.
Greta and then Dan.
I just wanted to clarify. So we're just voting on to make sure we're in agreement of what our suggestion to the select board is going to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dan.
First of all, I want to thank you all for laying this out. Todd, I can get behind that, and maybe a question for you, but for the group also. Like, we're on this slide 9, and we've been talking about the financial piece of this. That all makes sense, and I think I can get behind that because I'm with you. I'd rather be bold and think bigger than not. But there's the money part, but then there's this coordination or process or whatever you want to call it on this slide. Do we need this to happen, this coordination, Jill, I think you're talking about, in order to make that money worthwhile? And are we ignoring this?
Yes, because if you consider what's going on right now, if this year is the same as last year, we don't actually need any extra money, except for Trina's salary. We need to allocate that. We have encumbered funds already that we can use. 200,000 is what we need to radically change the programs and make sure that everything on this slide, that the two streamlining the development process and making the development financially attractive happens.
Sorry, Jill, you don't know that. You don't know that number. You have no, with due respect. Sorry, we have no idea what that number is.
You know, I have a thought. Why don't we?
I agree. One can figure out that thing, but we don't know. Todd just picked a random number.
It's true.
I'm not saying that it is going to cost 200. I'm going to say if we don't do anything on this page of streamlining the development process and making development financially attractive, we have no evidence to suggest that we need more money than we did last year.
I agree, but Todd's proposal is not to do that.
I have an idea. So if we're going to go and we're saying we're going to take 150 because Trina's 50, we're just making that up within that number, right? 150. We're putting it towards success in housing, right? So perhaps I don't disagree with Jill or Dan on this thing. I think people will figure it out because there's so much will in this town. And unfortunately, Jill, you'll just do more work, right? So it's really about, but maybe so it's the 150 goes toward these successful programs and the possibility of finding a coordinator to help manage this slide and its outcomes. So if we go and attach that coordinator position or whatever it might be called, that could exist for, it might take 6 months to find someone. We may never find someone. It could be hourly, it could be a job, it could be a town job. We could talk about broadening the reach of what this reserve fund could mean for how the money could be spent from our recommendation.
Because one thing that could happen is that actually Trina could start many of the things here. She is a project manager. She does understand things. She's building her contacts with the state. So she could start a lot of this work.
We have started this. Quite frankly, we already have started several of these things because I work with the state legislature. I'm actually up in Montpelier now because I went to this today. Because we can't see. Keep it. Oh, you can't see it?
No.
My safe search is turning that off, Trina. Please put that away, please.
It's my blurred background. But anyway, and the only thing we haven't done is communicate more with the select board. I think it's imperative. I mean, they want to be involved in housing. And I think one of the things that can fix it is to have more routine updates with them, maybe on a quarterly basis, what's going on. I don't know how, I know that was happening a little bit, but
I think
this is you got to jump in with both feet if you're going to be part of the housing work, because there's a lot of different terminology and things that go on, just like they did with water and everything else. So if housing is on their plate now, then let's do it, but they have to be engaged and ready to buy into it.
Okay, I think we need to try to bring this to a close. Todd, there's the discussion here is basically to simply add, not simply, well, to simply add one task to the list of tasks that you were proposing to have, which is a huge one, a huge task, but a simple one, which is the things on this page. Right. And
Correct.
so if the are you okay if the proposal includes that? You said that
Yeah, I am, because it still points towards success. It still points toward moving the needle in the right direction, and I think that's what we have to prove, that we're not just throwing a dart, we're having a tactical strike here.
So I think what we're saying then, if I can just restate your proposal, just in my own
Please do,
words,
John. Please do.
that we're proposing that we continue to fund in the same way that we're continuing to fund the marketing plan. We continue to fund the housing advisor, that the housing advisor continue with their current responsibilities, but I think implicitly shifts a meaningful part of their time from overseeing the current programs, not all of which are running at a high volume, to this page.
And absorbs lease to locals.
Right. Sorry. Bring lease to locals in-house. Take net the amount of time that the housing advisor is spending on the current programs and reduce that. Take the amount of time that the housing advisor is spending on this slide, which you've just started to do, and significantly increase that. And so that's the working part and the fund and the expense part of your proposal. And then the other part of your proposal is, and in addition to agree not to touch, to add another $150,000 to encumbered housing funds for success-based programs only, and to revisit that encumbrance in a year. Right. Okay. So
well said. Nice job.
So can we vote on that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anyone who? So let's say all in favor of that.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Sorry. 3. Raise your. Okay. All opposed. Not voting, I think, is Michael and Greta.
Yeah.
Abstaining. You can abstain.
I mean, I'm leaning towards yes. I'm confused. I mean, I guess I will say I'm in support of reserving as much money as we can for housing. I agree with that.
Okay. Sorry, Larry, you've raised your hand. Roger, I'm sorry, but I need to, just because we're running out of time now, I just need to focus on the EDC members. So Larry, what were you going to say?
I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Michael, do you want to say anything? You're welcome to abstain.
No, I was an abstention. I was an aye, John.
Oh, you were an aye. Okay, sorry. So can we vote again? So all the ayes, please. Those voting aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nay. 1, 2, 7. I'm missing somebody. Oh, Deborah.
Deborah,
are you there? Okay. All right. So that the motion passes then 5-2. So that will be our recommendation. Can I ask I'll call this informal permission. I am strongly in favor of Todd's proposal. The only reason I voted against this was I believe that the additional encumbrance of $150,000 let me start again. I believe the select board is only in a position mentally and emotionally to propose small things that are needed to continue programs. And that anything that has a big figure on it, no matter what it is, will be immediately ignored and we will lose an opportunity. We're going to present this proposal. I've made that point before. So
yeah, but John, wasn't this?
No, hold on. Let me just finish. Joe, let me finish.
Yeah.
We have already approved this motion, and I'm going to present that motion as approved and as proposed. I'm not trying to convince anybody. What I'm asking is I don't want to undercut this by the action that I'm asking for permission of, but I think that it is appropriate. The encumbrance has no effect. We are talking about an organization that can choose to encumber and unencumber at will.
Not if we have a grant agreement. Let's make a grant agreement. Let's make one.
We won't have, you didn't, we're not creating a grant agreement. We voted on encumbering the funds.
Yeah, but we've gone in every single time we voted for people to have funds. We've made an agreement, make an agreement with the housing.
So just to be clear, the EDC will not, when this passes, the EDC will not be able to spend that money. They've asked us not to make any more grants.
We're going and proposing that we continue something that isn't what they asked, but it's a no-brainer because they're not going to spend anything on waste. So the worst thing that happens is that they get a new ADU. And okay, so we're going to stop and say like, hey, so there's someone that might be interested in ADU. Like, can we talk about getting $18,000? And it's like, no, a new ADU is a win for the town. We already know the ROI on it. We already know what happens when someone moves here. We already know. We've already done this work.
And wait a minute.
Okay.
And wait a minute, John. In addition to this,
I withdraw my request.
This dovetails into one of their priorities anyway.
I withdraw my request. Okay. We have sorry, Jill, did you want to say something?
Well, you gave me permission before to present to the select board what we want to do as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Well, we would like to present, I would like to present a proposal that doesn't have that encumbrance on, because I don't want this kind of argument to happen. I actually want a yes on January the 21st. And I think that the way to get a yes is not to ask for more money, except to pay Trina to keep it going.
Right. There's no question in my mind about that, but the EDC has not voted that way. So I'm not going to, I don't want, yeah, I don't believe there's, I believe that the harm that I think will be caused by the optics of this proposal can be undone with some work. And so I don't want to, because I'm an EDC member, I feel, Jill, as I said before, you can propose what you'd like to propose, because I think the working group deserves a voice, even though you're not an official group. I'm not going to do anything other than present what the EDC voted on, because I think any EDC member, including me, stands up and says, by the way, here's another adjustment to that, is not fair to the group. So
John, we've gone many times with them with options. I just think we shouldn't go with a bad option.
No, you don't need to go.
I think that there's a bit of daftness on the select board's position when it comes to a dollar figure. And if they hear $1 and they hear 25 cents, they're going to just say 25 cents. Like, that's how I feel. I could be totally wrong, but that's my gut, right? So it's sort of.
Anyway, well, guys, we've decided. I think we're doing. I'm comfortable proceeding this way. I think that given the options that I have, this is the best way to proceed. I do not want to. It's important to not project disarray from among the EDC. We voted. It was 5-2. A majority feel comfortable with it. We discussed it fully. Everyone understood what we were voting for.
Fair.
I think we're in good shape. And Jill, I think if you want to, I think you should reflect what you think the working group, any amendment. I mean, don't go in a completely different direction. Hopefully, well, you're not going to. Make the working group should have a bit of a voice. So think briefly. Briefly state after we say what the EDC is voted on and recommended, and I'll describe the discussion and so forth and what we considered. Then you can sort of chime in with a bit of a working group perspective, and that'll be fine.
And John, I don't think it's a little thing to state, based on your priorities, based on one of your priorities, this is what the EDC feels how we can address one of your priorities.
That's exactly what I'm going to say. That's exactly what I'm going to say, and I'm going to present the proposal that we voted on.
Right.
Good.
But this is based addressing one of your priorities.
That's exactly what I'm going to say. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's fine. Okay.
Say it in Latin, John.
Ah!
I'm going to say it with enthusiasm. All right. So I think what we've done, just to go back, is we have. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong document. So I think what we have done actually is this plus the housing part of this. And the one thing that I will end the discussion then with the select board is to say, this does not, we did not reject, we did not discuss other select board priorities. We did not discuss how could we help with affordability or efficient and effective government or climate resiliency, nor did we discuss and evaluate whether or not some of our other priorities, like childcare, supporting events and so forth, whether those deserve, support your 4 goals or not. If you'd like, we can continue to discuss that. We can discuss those other priorities of ours or yours, and give you input as to what we think makes sense. But everyone is aligned, you and we, on the importance of housing. And so we ended up spending our time on that. And here's our proposal as to how to proceed with housing. So,
there you go.
And they may or may not ask us to opine on the rest. I suspect they won't, just only because of capacity, not because of anything else. So, okay. Anything else?
Is there anything else?
No, nothing else on the agenda. We're good. Can we have a motion?
Okay.
To adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Greta and Joe, Todd second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
Any opposed?
Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, good work.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, good
Bye.
job.
Thanks, Todd.
Take care. Whoops.
I think